Well, good morning, y'all. Thank you for being here. We've got a quorum now, so let's get started. If you've got your phone, you can play along, snap the QR code, or just play along as we go through the questions. Sound good? It's up to you, however you want to do it. All right. So you can talk at your table if you want, but I want you to match these sibling pairs from famous movies. Who goes with Mufasa? Scar. That one's easy. What movie is that? Lion King. Yay. Okay, how about this one? Thor Odinson. Who's his sibling?
Loki.
Loki. Yep. Ferris?
Genie.
What movie?
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's a classic. And Frito.
Must be Michael.
Michael. Anyone know the movie?
Godfather.
Godfather. Frito and Michael. A wonderful, beautiful brother relationship, right? Not quite. All right. Good. Y'all figured those out. Not too bad. Oop.
So what's the second pair from? Is it the Avengers?
Yeah. Avengers. Yeah, that's Thor and Loki. There they are all lined up.
I mean,
lots of movies, actually.
Norse mythology.
Norse mythology before that. Yes, yeah. All right, here we go. According to a 2007 Christmas movie, Santa has a rival brother named what? Sam, John, Fred, Chris, or Will?
Fred.
Fred? Who says Fred? Who says Chris? Okay, anyone say Sam?
Satan.
Satan?
Yeah, you changed the letters around.
Oh, that's probably one of those weird stop motion animated movies from the 60s. I bet it does that. Yeah, those are
Santa
creepy.
Claus wears a red suit. He's a communist.
Oh, and he gives out all the, oh man, everyone's favorite communist. Yeah, I could see that. All right.
Long hair and a beard must be a pacifist.
Sneaks in your house at night.
What's in the pipe that he's smoking?
Okay, the answer was Fred. Fred Claus. Has anyone seen that movie? It's actually pretty good.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a funny one. It's not a classic. Vince Vaughn is Santa's little brother, Fred. And I think who plays Santa? It's not Paul Giamatti. The other guy, character actor. All right, Nicolas Cage plays both brothers in this film about rival screenwriters. Let's see if you'll have seen this. Face Off.
No.
Armageddon. Or Adaptation. Sorry, Adaptation.
That's my guess.
The Family Man. Raising Arizona. Or Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
He's not even in that one.
Hey, you're right. He's actually in all of these, but not in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Yeah. Face Off?
No, that one's weird.
That is a weird one. It's John Travolta and Nick Cage. Are they brothers, though? I don't think they're brothers.
They're doing a criminal thing.
They are, yeah. It's a pretty good movie.
Adaptation makes sense.
It's Adaptation. If you haven't seen it, it's a pretty good movie where Nicolas Cage plays both brothers. One is like a really nerdy guy who writes these really important screenplays and yada, yada, yada. And then the other brother writes this action movie that's just complete drivel. But the action movie gets bought and they're really popular and he makes a lot of money. So you have these two brothers that just do not get along and they're exact opposites, but they're both played by Nicolas Cage. It's a really good movie. Kelly won!
It seems odd because Nicolas Cage pretty much only plays one character. How do you tell?
He really does, doesn't he? And he goes full Nicolas Cage in some of those movies. Wicker Man, you ever seen Wicker Man? He goes full Nicolas Cage in that one. It's a weird movie, a remake of another weird movie. All right, so I just threw up some of the ones that came to my mind of movies with sibling rivalries, sibling relationships. So anyone seen Royal Tenenbaums? Classic movie, really weird, but it's all about sibling relationships. It's got Bill Murray in it, so you know it's good. The Lion King, we've all seen that one, right? The classic sibling relationship there. Oy, Scar and Mufasa. Does not end well, does it? No. In Her Shoes, have y'all seen this one? It's a wedding one. Two sisters at a wedding, so you know there's drama, right? Rachel getting married. Anyone seen that one? Two sisters at a wedding, so you know there's drama, right? I was going through it. I found probably 10 wedding movies that were all about sibling issues. I mean, that's a. I mean, have you ever been at a wedding with
more
multiple?
on the Hallmark Channel.
Oh yeah, the Hallmark Channel probably has like dozens and dozens just at Christmas themed versions of that. The King's Speech.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a brother rival kind of movie. Who are the two brothers? Do you remember?
And Prince Edward.
Prince Edward and Prince George. King Edward, King George. One is a bit more of a playboy, right? He becomes king, but he kind of squanders being king. Remember that? And then, yeah, advocates the throne. So there's brother rivalry going on there. And in fact, if we were looking at the royal family right now, is there brother issues?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that point came up on the internet a week or two ago that's how Queen Elizabeth got in line, is because
Yeah.
Edward.
Yeah, she wouldn't have even been.
Out.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, here's a classic from the 60s. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane? Who's seen that one?
Yeah.
It's kind of a horror film as I was rewatching it. I mean, it is scary and intense, and it's about sisters. Betty Davis and Joan Crawford. It's Joan Crawford. Yeah, and I think that the basic plot is one was a child star who kind of popped and fizzled, and then the other one had some later in life Hollywood success, but then something happens and one has to take care of the other, and it's just dark. And it's like, you know, if we're honest, a lot of our sibling relationships left to their own devices would end up like whatever happened to Baby Jane. All right, Little Women. Right? It's got like 6 sisters or something like that, 5 or 6. Is there drama? Yeah, you better believe it. I actually love that book and movies. They're fighting over Timothy Chalamet. You saw the version I saw. Yeah. Adaptation was that one I was talking about. East of Eden. Anyone seen this classic film?
Yeah, James Dean.
Yeah, James Dean. And it's a retelling of which brother story from the Bible?
Cain and Abel, I guess.
Cain and Abel, which is why it's called East of Eden. That's a great one if you haven't seen it. Step Brothers, a comedy about 2 stepbrothers who are actually in their 40s, I think, when they become stepbrothers, and they just won't grow up. Pretty funny movie. There's a rivalry there. The Godfather, we said that one. The Other Boleyn Girl. Anyone seen that one? Yeah, it's about Anne Boleyn and her sister. I don't even remember if there was a sister in real life. I think there was.
There is a sister.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, so this is a dramatization of that historical family and event during. Yes, yeah. So it's having to do with the King Henry VIII stuff. Again, another wedding movie in some ways. All right, why do I bring this up? Well, actually, let's think about this. Think of sibling movies, or even movies with broken relationships in general. Maybe they're family ones, maybe they're not. Can you think of your favorite movie reconciliation moment? So here's our word of the day, reconciliation. Does anyone have an idea of what reconciliation means?
Coming back together.
It can be literally coming back together. So there's the word reconciliation kind of assumes there was some type of broken relationship. Okay, when we talk about being reconciled, we're usually talking about a broken relationship and coming back together. And how is it when they come back together?
Okay.
It's great. There's what are some fruits of the Spirit that we see happen when reconciliation happens?
Love, joy, peace.
Love, joy, peace, forgiveness.
Yeah.
Faithfulness. I mean, it's almost like all the fruits of the Spirit coming together to restore a relationship between 2 people and make it right. There's our word right again. So it's basically, if we're going to use our previous language that we've been talking about, righteousness, this is restoring righteousness to a relationship. Does that make sense? So when a relationship is broken, that means things have not been right. They're gone. So if we were to review some of our stuff from previous weeks, we've got our 2 types of righteousness, right? How are we reconciled with God? That vertical righteousness that was broken at the fall or the leap. Through Christ. We're reconciled with God there. How are we reconciled with people?
Eating our pride and saying we're sorry.
Okay, eating our pride, saying we're sorry. Forgiveness, being free-willing with forgiveness and also accepting it when it's given to us, right? Who's actually at work in those things?
Right.
Christ again, right? So while we are fully reconciled with Christ, these relationships we have with other people that are, there's a lot of broken ones out there. I know I've got some that I really need to reconcile. When they're fully reconciled, it's actually God at work, in, through, and despite us, because our old Adam, I'm going to throw in a term there, our old Adam doesn't want reconciliation. It wants to be right. It wants to be in charge. It's that heel grabber like Jacob, right? Does Jacob really want reconciliation with Esau? He hasn't really been acting like it so far in our story, has he? No? Okay, so here's my question. Now that we know what reconciliation is, can you think of a movie, a story, a TV show where there's reconciliation? Yeah.
Anakin and Luke.
Anakin and Luke! That's one of my favorites. There's reconciliation when Anakin, Darth Vader at that point, like saves Luke and throws the Emperor down the well. And there's reconciliation right before he dies, right? Now, who did he have a broken relationship to in the Star Wars movies? Do you remember? Who was his
His twin,
oh, well, yeah, Luke's twin, Leia.
Luke and Leia.
Yeah, there's reconciliation there. What about Anakin's master? Who was he?
Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan. There's a whole series right now. Is that relationship reconciled yet? No, they actually meet in the first Star Wars, and Darth Vader kills him.
Yeah.
Right? So is there reconciliation there? Well, they kind of hint at it in the later Star Wars movies, where there's some type of reconciliation with their Force ghosts or something. That's a stretch, right? After death reconciliation? Who would have possibly believe in that?
But you mentioned it earlier. Every show on Hallmark's about that.
Yeah.
Every show on
There's
Hallmark,
always-
especially at
there's always
Christmas.
a point where they break up and then.
Oh yeah, it's called
And they
it's like that third act breakup,
Yeah.
right? You get the first act kind of building relationship. Second act, you get some more conflict, tension. At the end of the second act, beginning of the third act, there's some type of
Break it.
breakup. And then by the end of the third act, there's reconciliation. You see it in so many movies, that third act break and then reconciliation. But
That's the formula, right?
that's the formula. Have you seen Harry and the Hendersons? Okay, it's this family discover Sasquatch, Bigfoot. This is an 80s movie. And he hangs out with them for the first and second act, but at some point they have to like yell at him to go away, go, we don't love you anymore, because they want to save him from being captured or whatever. And then by the third act, of course, they come together, right? This is the major trope of movies. We have such a
Or even Harry Met Sally.
Harry Met Sally, or You've Got Mail, or what's the other one?
Sleepless in Seattle.
Sleepless in Seattle, the prequel to
All
You've Got Mail.
romance movies.
All of those movies have that. Any movie that takes place in New York City that has any type of romance probably has a reconciliation moment, right?
It's fun to watch those little movies that still have landlines.
Yeah, right. Now, are there films out there that leave things unreconciled? Yeah. Yeah, and they don't always sit well with you.
We usually don't like them, right?
We usually don't like them. We like our reconciliation moments. We want that. We yearn for that. In fact, horror movies, the most disturbing ones out there, leave things unreconciled. Right? Drama and suspense movies.
That's for the sequel.
That's for the sequel. You leave things unreconciled too, right? And sometimes they try to close the loop after 20 films or something. But some of the most disturbing movies out there are ones that break familiar relationships, break family relationships, break, whatever, and they don't even attempt to put them back together, right? The show Breaking Bad. You seen that one? This is kind of a very postmodern thing. Is we have lots of films and TV shows that do the opposite of reconciliation, and acknowledge the truth that in this world that we live in, is everything reconciled all the time? No. We don't like that, though. We don't like it at all. So be aware of that when you're watching a TV show. I want you to have that word reconciliation in your mind, and look at how powerful it is in some of your favorite movies, and how deconstructing the lack of it can be in other movies.
Isn't that the whole point of the movies, to go for an hour or two and
Yeah.
everything gets fixed?
Absolutely. That's absolutely. But there are a lot of movies out there you'll walk out of and nothing was fixed. No Country for Old Men. Seen that film? Cormac McCarthy sometimes leaves things broken.
Easy running.
Easy, yeah. Yeah, and there's some weird twists on reconciliation out there too, like Thelma and Louise.
Yeah.
You know, it's a weird twist on it. It's not quite real reconciliation. Cormac McCarthy in No Country for Old Men is definitely the one that comes to my mind. But he's written some other books and stories too, where there's reconciliation in ways you don't expect that are realistic. So if you've seen the one, it's a post-apocalyptic one from Cormac McCarthy about a dad and his son trying The Road. Yeah, there are things still broken at the end, but there is some life and new birth and reconciliation. And you said it earlier, Rachel. Every story, there's like 7 stories out there.
There's only 7 plots.
And they're all having to do with, will things be reconciled or not? And that's kind of what our lives are about too, isn't it? And you see people who rest in reconciliation and those who don't see it anywhere, right? You'll see this at funerals, right? When you grieve, you're really grieving reconciliation sometimes because maybe you didn't have a chance to reconcile. Or the fact that someone dies is a weird, unreconciled thing that we as Christians have hope for reconciliation in the future for, right? So we have total hope for reconciliation on both planes, you know, horizontal and vertical, but it's hard to see sometimes. So let's look at a messy relationship in Genesis. We started talking about Jacob and Esau last week. And those of you who weren't here, let's do a quick Spark Notes version of Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau were twins. And who was technically born first? Esau. And Jacob was born grabbing onto his heel, trying to pull him back in the womb so he could be first. It was like a wrestling match in the womb. Okay, and I want you to remember that. It was like a wrestling match in the womb. There's even a description of that's what she was feeling in her belly when they were there. Okay? So Jacob and Esau then have just a beautiful relationship where they both understand their role to play and they get along great, right? No. We see Jacob tricking Esau not once but twice. We see him tricking Esau for his birthright over some lentil stew. And the fullness of the story probably is that Esau was starving. And Jacob bails him out from that, but with a catch. Hey, give me your birthright and I'll give you some stew and save your life. Okay? Then later on, and we didn't get to read it last week, Jacob and Esau have another kind of run-in. Isaac is starting to wind down, and he knows it. He's kind of sick and bedridden, and he needs to give his blessing on his son, Esau. Jacob pretends to be Esau. Do you remember the lengths he went through to do it?
Stole his clothes.
Yeah, stole some of his clothes, put on goat skin on his arm because Esau was a really hairy dude. So Jacob puts goat skin on his arm.
He used long sleeves, so it just had to do his hands.
Yeah, that'd be the way to do it. And his mother's helping him scheme with this too. Okay, so there's a lot of scheming going on. Good old Rebecca. And long story short, Jacob is able to not only steal the birthright, but steal the blessing that was intended for Esau.
So he gets it from his mom?
Yeah, maybe. Well, I mean, sin is handed down in so many ways, isn't it? So what was our Christ moment? Do you remember our Christ moment last week?
Both of them, Isaac and...
Do you guys remember our Christ moment last week, how this story pointed to Christ?
The need for Christ.
Definitely the need for it, because they are absolute sinners and schemers, and so are we. We're just like Jacob and just like Esau. Who's your brother? Christ. Okay, who deserves to inherit everything? Christ. Who schemes to take that away from him? You and me. But unlike Esau, Christ just willingly gives his blessing and his birthright to his brothers. Does that make sense? So that was kind of our Christ moment last week. So this week, we're jumping ahead in the story to fill in the gap. Jacob grows up a little bit. He has to run away because Esau is gonna kill him. So he runs away to his mother's family and his uncle, Laban. Okay? And Jacob meets his match in Laban. Yeah. And if you remember from the story, Laban tricks Jacob a bunch of times, tricks him into marrying his less desirable daughter first, and then he, after even working another 7 years or something, he gets to marry his other daughter, the one he actually wanted to marry. So he's tricked into working twice as many number of years as he says he will to win over the daughter. So he has 2 wives now, and I'm sure we've looked at Genesis throughout, and when there's more than one wife, it just goes great, right? No, they become rivals, and it's a hot mess too, and sometimes they work together, sometimes they don't. Laban is just the worst father-in-law in so many ways, and yet Jacob keeps getting blessed by God throughout all of that. Jacob's flocks that he's been given ownership of just boom. They grow. Jacob, his household grows. He gets more and more servants, more and more money, more and more flocks. And Laban then becomes jealous. And Laban's sons become jealous. And they start to kind of plot against Jacob. So Jacob then plots back against Laban that he's going to leave. And he just kind of sneaks out in the middle of the night while Laban's off doing other things. Jacob's wife steals Laban's idols. Remember that part of it? And we don't really know what that's all about, but these household idols might have been almost like symbols of power for your clan, symbolizing who's in charge of your tribe. Does that make sense? Or who has ownership of all of your lands if you had those idols. It very well could have been she thought those idols had power, right? And she's stealing those idols to gain power, and she's not having faith in Yahweh in that moment. Some people throughout history have said she's stolen the idols to keep her father from having false gods. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. Because then she hides them from him through scheming, and he doesn't find them, and they kind of go on their way. So that's where we're at in the story, is Jacob has yet again schemed, this time against another master schemer, which is Laban, and his wife in the meantime is also scheming and lying to him, yada, yada, yada. Does that make sense? So what I would love for y'all to do is I've given you a version of Scripture. It's the God's Word translation, and I have taken out all verse numbers, all chapter numbers, all headings, and it's just the text as close to like a narrative version as we can get. So there's 2 huge things that happen in this section of the text. One is there's a wrestling match, and the other is some reconciliation. And they're both very important, but I've been training y'all over the past few weeks on what to look for when you read these things. So I want to see what y'all are capable of. I've given you some questions to talk about at the end, and we're going to talk about them together. But right now, if you're at home watching, pause the video, and on your handout there is the entire thing you should read, and then we'll come back together in a moment. Those are all at the tables. Go ahead and pick someone at your table to read it out loud together. Take turns if you want, whatever you want to do, and then discuss those questions at the end as a table. Does that make sense? Any questions? All right, you know what to look for. Anyone want to take a stab at summarizing what you just read? It's a lot. What's the first big thing that happens in this reading?
Jacob did enough self-evaluation, but
I like that.
He had a big part in the whole mess.
I like that. I like that a lot. Do we see some character growth with Jacob finally? Yeah. What do you think might have brought that about if you're thinking about the story up to this point?
Well, like you said, dealing with Laban.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing how we're so blind to our own sin until someone reflects that sin back on us? You know what I mean? And some of us, including myself, are so blind to our own sin, we'll start pointing fingers at others. Man, that guy's a schemer. He's a schemer. He's a schemer. Not even thinking about how we've been. Right?
Great fingers pointing back at me.
Yeah. Like, I've always loved that. And one of the things is, what does God's Word help us do? Take off some of those blinders, right? I want you to remember something. When you're reading about Laban, when you're reading about Jacob, when you're reading about David being an idiot, when you're reading about the disciples or the Pharisees, not only should we always ask that question, how does this point to Christ, but we should also ask this question, oh man, how am I like these people? Right? And I think Jacob is maybe finally realizing what it's like to be schemed against. Right? The other word I want to throw out there is strive or wrestle. Right? Jacob has spent his entire life striving after things and wrestling with other people and striving with other people, right? And he's strived with Laban for over 20 years. And it hasn't been all fun and games. So
Yeah, it wasn't a physical wrestling match, but him and Esau were.
him and Esau, you can imagine they probably did have some physical wrestling matches. I bet they did as brothers. I don't know any pair of
They just
brothers
didn't
that
write
hasn't.
it down.
Just didn't write it down because it's assumed. Every brother wrestles with his brother, right? But the striving between, the wrestling between Jacob and Esau was so much of his life before he left the promised land in exile. I want you to remember that when he ran off because Esau was going to kill him, he had to cross a river, the Jordan, and leave the promised land. And now we're getting the account of him coming back to the promised land and crossing that river going the other way. He's been in exile this whole time. And that's something we're going to see over and over again as we get into Exodus and some other books of the Bible. Okay? Yeah?
How many times has he asked God for help in the past? My impression is he's never relied on God before.
I don't
It's
remember
always been
him.
him.
Yeah.
By his own doings, and now all of a sudden, hey, I may be killed here. I need your help.
Yeah, and I think he's probably realizing too a little bit when he left the promised land and he went into exile, the only thing he had with him was a walking stick, right? And what's he coming back with though? He left the promised land with a walking stick. He's coming back with what? A whole bunch of stuff. Yeah, when you see these lists of things in the Bible, don't start doing numerology like, 20 this and 30 that. Just think, look at the blessings upon blessings upon blessings he has coming back. Who has been faithful to Jacob? God has. Okay, and as he's coming back with all this stuff, is he still scheming though?
Yes.
Okay, what's the plan he's come up with? Because he knows he's going to run into Esau at some
He's going
point.
to butter his brother up by giving him gifts.
Yeah, he's going to spread out his folks. You split up the wives and split up the stuff. And he's sending people ahead to show up like in different waves of gift giving, right? He's trying to butter up his brother to give him gifts. Rachel, that's a great way to put it. Okay, what else just plot-wise is going on? On his way, he's sleeping at night, and what happens?
He gets wrestled with.
Some dude shows up and like starts wrestling with him. Right? Yeah, and it's a long wrestling match that takes all night. The sun's about to come up. And who wins the wrestling match?
God
The
does.
visitor, the stranger.
Jacob's winning.
Technically,
No.
Jacob
It's
wins.
a tie.
No. Jacob wins. But you're right. The stranger actually has all the power, but Jacob wins. It's weird. We'll come back to that in a second. Okay, the wrestling match goes on. Wakes up in the morning, he's given a new name. It turns out, who was he wrestling with? God the whole time. Okay. In the dirt. Okay. And then he shows up. He sees who off in the distance? Esau. What happens?
Then he sends his servants and their kids first, and then the lesser wife and her kids, and then Rachel and
Esau comes running to him.
He starts to scheme again and plan again, right? But Esau and him see each other and they run to each other, embrace, and Esau and him both what? Cry. These are tears of sadness. These are tears of joy. These are tears of love and forgiveness. These are tears of reconciliation. Unexpected reconciliation. Right?
I guess Esau missed the schemer a little bit.
Esau missed the schemer a little bit. So now that
It would appear to be pretty obvious that Esau didn't know what to expect either.
Esau didn't
He brought
know.
400 men with him.
right. And these are the things that, like, this ancient culture that they're surrounded by, these tribes that have like formed in these groups of people, there would have been armed men, and it wouldn't have been uncommon for a brother's tribe to battle another brother's tribe to try to get supremacy. Like that Cain and Abel stuff, but with now all of their followers. That is the way the world works in the ancient world. Right? So, Jacob and Esau both have armies, if you will, huge households with armed men. And it wouldn't have been uncommon in Canaan and the area around them that those types of things would end up with a battle. And you would take all of your brother or cousins or, even your sons or whatever stuff. Not uncommon. But here we see God calling his brothers to be a little different. You know what I'm saying? And the Edomites, that's Esau's descendants, they go off and have their own little kingdom, while Jacob's descendants, and he's got a new name, doesn't he now? Israel becomes Israel. Okay, let's look at the details now. Now that we got a general idea of what's going on, let's look at details, because details are pretty important. All right. As Jacob went on his way, God's angel met him. When he saw them, Jacob said, "This is God's camp." He named that place Mahanaim, 2 camps. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau. Okay. And the messengers came back to Jacob. All right, where's our wrestling match? A little further, isn't it? So we get the details of how much stuff he has. We talked about the importance there. Any other things that popped out to y'all so far that you were like, I want to know what's going on there? Okay, y'all figured out that he was scheming.
It was interesting. He said, I know you promised me this stuff, but I'm still afraid.
Yeah. And that's our prayer in a lot of ways too, isn't it? It's the prayer that we see later on in the New Testament. I believe, help me in my unbelief. And that's just a good posture to have, because man, we are full of unbelief, but I believe. Help me in my unbelief.
I thought it was interesting that he named the place 2 camps.
2 camps. Yeah.
Because it was really, it appears as though he named it, this is the angels' camp, God's camp, and my camp.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But then he split it into my 2 camps.
Yeah.
So this one he's scheming.
He's scheming. Yeah, it's just he's such a schemer, and he's wrestling not only with other people throughout his story. We get a point now where he wrestles with God himself, but he's wrestling within himself too, isn't he? This faith in the promise and this doubting of it and trying to take things into his own hands. And in so many ways, you and I are like Jacob. We're wrestlers. We wrestle with other human beings, we wrestle with God, and we wrestle within ourselves. It's like all we do.
Well, and he psychs himself out, because he's even saying, he's like, well, I'll have it 2 camps, and Esau will attack one. That means all of the rest of us.
Right. I'm hedging my bets.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a bet hedger too.
So he's not trusting God.
No, not fully. Not fully. And I'll throw this out there. I think it's an okay theory or statement. I don't think we ever get a single human being in the Old Testament that fully trusts God. There's always a little bit of 2 camps.
Well, yeah, because he's saying, you promised me all this, but just in case.
Just in case. Yeah, that's so us, isn't it? That's me. That's definitely me to a T. We do this with our tithing, don't we? I know I do. All right, God, I'll give the 10% this one. I'm going to hold some back, though, because I just don't know if I can really trust you to provide. I mean, I got a lot of bills, right? I mean, we all do this in some way, shape, or form. All right. Place the servants in charge of the herds. He split them up, all those things going on. Anything else that really stuck out to you? All right. During that night, let's get to that part. During that night, and now we're seeing why the people added verse numbers so you can reference where we are. Mm-hmm. So there's strengths and weaknesses to it. Yeah.
Back to that not trusting God. He said, he says, the God of my grandfather Abraham and the God of my father Isaac.
Not my God.
Exactly. This is a very important detail to bring out. And it's not the first time he's done that. He does that throughout. And there is a point where he finally says, my God. There is. And how often do you and I do this too? Like if you grew up in the church, it's your parents' faith for a lot of your life, it feels like. And then you might have this moment where you finally remember your baptism, if you will, and now it's your faith. And you start to take ownership of it. It's my God. Now, there is something beautiful about him still saying, though, that the God of my grandfather, the God of my father, the God of, right? And those are very beautiful things, though. I mean, this is not a bad thing that we have that going on in our lives, but there should be a moment where it is now your God. And you realize all along it was, right? That's really important. And this isn't the first time in this Genesis account that he does that. Dealing with Laban, he does that. He does it then too. All right. During that night, wait, where were we at? There it is. During that night, he got up and gathered his 2 wives, his 2 slaves, and his 11 children, and crossed at the shallow part of the Jabbok River. After he sent them across the stream, he sent everyone else across, so Jacob was left alone. Then a man wrestled with him until dawn. That's pretty cryptic and out of nowhere, isn't it? Kind of weird. It gets your attention. At least it should. When the man saw that he could not win against Jacob, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that it was dislocated as they wrestled. What? That is one of the weirdest lines in the Bible. When the man saw that he could not win against Jacob, in other words, when the man saw that he was so humiliated by Jacob, he then touches his hip with his finger, Jacob's hip, and dislocates it. What kind of power does this man have? Infinite. But yet at the same time, he cannot win.
He didn't.
And he didn't. Think about this. Well, as we get revealed who this is, think about this. Then the man said, "Let me go, it's almost dawn." But Jacob answered, "I won't let you go until you bless me." Has Jacob figured out who this is?
I don't know.
I think he might start to have an inclination now because he saw some of the power. And as soon as he saw the power, he's like, "Oh, I'm clinging on to this. Please bless me." So the man asked him, "What's your name?" "Jacob," he answered. And remember, what does Jacob mean? Schemer, heel grabber, wrestler. The man said, "Your name will no longer be heel grabber, but Israel." He struggles with God. He strives with God. He wrestles with God. It's a layered name. But it's one who wrestles with God. Because you have struggled with God and with men, and you have won. Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." The man answered, "Why do you ask for my name?" Then he blessed Jacob there. So Jacob named that place Peniel, face of God, because he said, "I have seen God face to face, but my life was saved." The sun rose as he passed Penuel. He was limping because of his hip. Yeah.
Most people, at least I think most people that are referenced to have seen God, they come away and they've got some state, they're glowing.
Yes.
Is that correct? I mean,
Yes.
like Moses or whatever, when he's gone, he's
Yeah.
but it doesn't mention anything like
No,
that.
he walks away limping.
God wasn't showing his glory like he did to Moses.
Was and wasn't. So have you heard of this term humiliation of God? So God humiliated himself when he became a man. And I'm not talking humiliated in the sense that we think of that term, but also I am thinking of it that way. God is all the way up here, super powerful, infinite being, right? But he lowers himself all the way down to man when he was born a man, right? We see him in a manger, in the muck, in a stable, right? This is, right here in the Old Testament, a bit of a precursor, a typology thing like we've talked about before of Good Friday. It points to Good Friday. On Good Friday, what happened to Christ?
Allowed himself to be killed.
He allowed himself to be killed. He lowered himself so much that his creation itself wrestles with him, humiliates him, tortures him, kills him. At any moment, could Christ have hopped off that cross and dislocated everyone's hips? He totally could have. But he allows himself to be defeated in the wrestling for the sake of the wrestler. Does that make sense? So Jacob wrestles with God, and I've said this before, if we have God getting in the mucky muck, it's which person of the Trinity? It's Christ. And this is another reason why I believe that, because this is one of those moments that points towards Christ in such a direct and beautiful way. God is in the dirt with his people, gives them a new name, lets them win the wrestling match, and gives them a blessing, but shows them how powerful he is. Right? Allows himself to be defeated. That's why this phrase, so Jacob was left alone, the man wrestled with him. When the man saw that he could not win against Jacob, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that it was dislocated as they wrestled. That's a God that could win anything, but he decides to be defeated to win. That's kind of scandalous, and that's how our God works. And it's beautiful. Amen? So that's what we got going on there. And then I want to point one other cool little detail out to you. All right. Then Esau asked, "Why did you send this whole group of people and animals I met?" And Jacob answers, "To win your favor, sir." Esau said, "I have enough. Keep what you have, brother." And Jacob says, "No, please take the gift I'm giving you, because I've seen your face as if I were seeing the face of God, and yet you welcomed me so warmly." So we've got this beautiful moment of reconciliation between two brothers. And Jacob, our schemer, who is now Israel, the one who wrestles with God and strives against God, is now saying that he sees who when he looks at his brother's face? Face of God. Remember our arrows on how things work around here? We got God up here, man here, and then, other men. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of proving my point that our reconciliation with God then flows through us and starts to reconcile us with others. We start to see Christ in other people when we wrestle with him. And he lets us win and gives us his blessing. Then when we see our brother who we have stolen birthrights from, or they've stolen birthrights from us, who do we see? We see the face of Christ, and reconciliation starts to become possible. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah. And I think the arrows here, this before that, is really important. Our reconciliation with God works itself out in and through reconciliation with others. Yeah.
So Jacob takes off and puts himself in exile. He gives up the birthright and the blessing back to Esau anyway.
Well, Esau didn't even need it. Because when he shows back up, Esau's got what? Blessings upon blessings. Which proves, where do any of these blessings come from?
From God.
From God. And that was a lot of the point of the Laban story too, is all of the blessings were coming from God anyways. So while these two brothers have been feuding with each other and plotting to destroy each other, steal blessings, and wanting to murder the other one, despite all that, God is still working blessings in through them. Which is absolutely beautiful, because it gives me hope, and I hope it gives you hope too. Amen? All right, go in peace and serve the Lord.